And we're back as the Obi-Wan Kenobi series concludes, and Elvis, the Black Phone, and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On all premiere in theaters. I'm Joe Acierno.
And I'm Darius Delsoin. This is Cinema Unchained.
All right, everybody, welcome to the one and only Cinema Unchained podcast. We have a jam-packed show for you today to make up for all the hiatus and technical difficulties from the last couple of weeks. And if you really missed us throughout the last couple of weeks, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't have, and you want more fun, honest, and engaging talks about motion pictures, smack that subscribe button and hit the bell to get all notifications, whether you're on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, before we dive into the new horror film, The Black Phone, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus came to a conclusion this past Wednesday. Set 10 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan Kenobi is tasked with rescuing a young Princess Leia from the clutches of the Empire. And if I had to sum this show up, it's basically a character study of Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Which is one of the reasons like why I was enthused about the show going into it, because Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite Star Wars character of all time. Like, what do you think of that diagnosis there?
That's an interesting, diagnosis of that. Yeah, I think ultimately, just like I said, it's called Kenobi for a reason. Just like how, Book of Boba Fett is called Book of Boba Fett. Like the title should have some meaning. So, and with Kenobi being a character study of that character, I do understand that sentiment. I do understand, maybe that approach that they took with this series. But for me, before I get to my thoughts, I know you said, I'd like to hear, your thoughts on overall, how did you feel about the show, and especially from that season finale?
So now, it's very weird how, I feel like the show definitely takes a while to gain its footing. It's definitely not perfect. Overall, I enjoyed it more than I didn't, after watching the last 2 episodes. But this is a 6-episode series, so I feel like, they should have gotten the ball rolling, a bit earlier. What I will say, and again, like I mentioned before, Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite Star Wars character of all time. And so much about what I loved in the character is still there throughout the show. His personality, his mannerisms, his overall character, the choices he makes. Ewan McGregor is still very charismatic as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he anchors the show. And what I will say is that somehow the show expands upon him as a character and made me love him even more. I loved his arc throughout the show. He shows how he has regret and guilt over everything that happened with Anakin Skywalker, his former Padawan, his former student in the Jedi arts and the Jedi training. And I love how throughout the show, he learns to come to terms more and more with the trauma of his past. And I think that is one of the biggest selling points of this show. There's more that I have to say as far as a variety of topics in this one series, but just that alone, that was enough for me to be okay, this was worth the watch.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. For me, this was a massive disappointment for me. I still wasn't too fond of the show, even after. If anything, I actually did not really like the finale all that much.
Really?
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
It didn't land or hit with me, and this goes to, again, it's going on the premise of what you were saying exactly, of that character study of Kenobi. I did thoroughly enjoy, and unfortunately, and for me, I think Kenobi was easily himself, Ewan McGregor, is the best part of the show. But at the same time, they also deviated a lot, or at least from him on occasion. And the last 2 episodes definitely felt, to me at least, a bit rushed with getting to that end point of how Kenobi should be at the end of this, before A New Hope and etc. Right in between that time period. And I think overall, and there's just other choices that they made and decisions, such as him. As much as I did like Princess Leia, she was adorable, I didn't think that was necessary, and plus, at the same time, for me, it kind of broke canon a bit, and I'm not too fond of that. And
how do you feel it broke canon a bit?
I feel, again, this can be interpreted, but it just feels odd, mainly because later on in Star Wars, Leia gives that message to Kenobi saying that, you served with my father during the Clone Wars, so that kind of gives the ascension that she only knew of him because of her father, not necessarily because of an interaction they had when she was younger. So that felt very odd and off to me. I did enjoy the bond they had, but even then, just certain things that happened, especially in the first 2-3 episodes when she was running through the forest and that whole thing, I did not like that scene.
Yeah, like some of like what I will say, like a lot of like especially in the beginning of the series, like a lot of the action sequences, like I didn't feel like they were properly executed, but like towards the end, there's one particular fight that goes on that I think was very well done and it was very satisfying. And this brings us to my next point, like the inclusion of Darth Vader and / Anakin Skywalker in the show. I don't know if it was you or someone else that said that, like, oh, they felt like he was in the show a bit too much. I loved the extent of his involvement in his show, or in this show, excuse me. I loved hearing both James Earl Jones' voice and seeing Hayden Christensen's performance in one particular installment. And I feel like he ultimately symbolizes Obi-Wan's regret and what he must come to terms with. And, of course, he's still very much an intimidating force to be reckoned with. Like, it just goes to show, like, how far the Star Wars franchise has come in terms of, like, technological innovation in its filmmaking, because there are things that Vader does in this series that, like, he couldn't really do in the original trilogy because, the technology just wasn't there yet, and I guess the imagination wasn't there too yet because, like, it was still very fresh and it was still very new, and, like, they were still figuring out exactly what they could do with it. And one of the things that I love too, again, like, as far as his inclusion, like, there's just certain imagery towards the end, I think you might know, like, what I'm talking about, that just shows, like, how far Anakin Skywalker has fallen at this point.
Yeah. I did like that scene. I did like that imagery as well, especially with how they changed the lighting for that scene and everything. But speaking on, like, Vader, it's like, I think for the story they needed to tell with Kenobi and how he was still felt regretful, held back, and etc. Because of that direction they had to put Vader in. I still think Vader served way too much time in the show. We got to see him too much. I personally was not too keen on that. I would have liked to have at least seen like that finale just didn't feel as impactful as it should, because we already saw him a number of times beforehand. And even then, when we did see him, I thought performance-wise, he was alright. He wasn't too bad. I think they definitely could have done more with Vader, but like, there's times when it's like he's powerful and then they hold it back. They hold him back for some reason, and again, that I'm a bit iffy on. But overall, I think Vader is an interesting choice to include. I still don't like that he had this much time in the show. And I think that's why, to me, the finale just felt so lackluster, was because we saw him quite a number of times, saw him how he was treating other people, even though I think certain characters should have been dead already, but I digress.
I feel like, before we touch on that, I feel like I might know, like, what you're talking about there, but maybe I'm wrong. But, like, I feel like his inclusion, to the extent that he was in this show, like, that just feeds into more, like, the overall conflict between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. And, like, after finishing this show, I'm like, okay, like, this is officially, in my point of view, the best conflict throughout the entire Star Wars franchise. I feel like this show really deepened the antagonism between the two in a way that I found lacking in the original films. And I just feel like, too, like, this entire conflict, like, shows opposing sides of how to deal with past traumas and insecurities. And, like, I remember looking at these two, especially in, like, the final episode, right? And, there's certain things in my past that I'm trying to come to terms with, like, particularly in, like, the last few months or so. And I feel like Obi-Wan, like, the good end of the conflict, right? Like, he shows, like, what it means to come to terms with them. And I feel like Vader, the bad side, is what happens when you let your traumas and insecurities take over you. And I feel like that it's important to see that conflict, especially when it comes to, like, dealing with your own things as well. And I feel like that's a great way to show, like, what happens when you move past them or when you let them drag you down and become you, really. Yeah. So that was very powerful to me.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, because I think, and I remember a while ago when Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were talking about the original trilogy, or the prequel trilogy, and Dave Filoni was just going in detail about what Kenobi meant to Anakin and how that was also kind of played a part into Anakin's fall, unfortunately, and so like you said, it deepened that relationship. I did like that. But again, for some reason, some of the characters, some of the line of dialogue, some of the action, overall, just it wasn't hitting at me compared to other Star Wars medium that I'm still used to, even some of the animated shows. So
yeah, if it's one thing, I'll definitely agree with you on. Like, the dialogue throughout a big chunk of the series is not the greatest. And again, like, the last two episodes, if you ask me, like, the last two episodes of the show are like what make the show worth watching. Like, it was a bit much. I'm not gonna say it was like a bit much, but like it required more effort for me to get through episodes 1 to 4 than 5 to 6. But once I got through like episodes 5 and 6, especially 6, I'm like, okay, like these first 4 episodes, they were worth it.
Yeah. So yeah, overall, I wasn't too fond of the show. I think it could have had a better. I don't know. I was massively just disappointed, especially at the end. From this show, and I think it's not necessarily I expected more. It's just I wanted them to do more instead of just not necessarily glossing over, but just I wanted them to go just go a bit further, just go a bit more, take out some of the some of the dialogue. It didn't feel as impactful as I think it should have. Overall, so
just something as funny enough, like I feel like there were certain things that maybe like weren't necessary in the show too. Like, what do you think of the character of Reva overall? Because like I felt like what she did, like her character arc was interesting, even though not all of it made sense. And like I'm thinking about this too, right? Like I'm not sure like how necessary she was to the show, because yeah, she is the thing. She is the one that like connects Obi-Wan and Vader for like a renewal of their conflict, right? But I'm like, okay, did we really need her to do that? Like, Vader's the one that's like looking for all these Jedi, right? Like, you mean to tell me like he couldn't find Kenobi without the help of Reva? Like, I find that very hard to believe.
No, yeah, Reva overall, I still don't like her. I think towards the end there are certain things that they did that I liked, but again, for her character specifically, they should have established it way early on. This show was too slow, I think, and it picks up, unfortunately, at the last 2 episodes. Your show should not be picking up at the last 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Certain reveals about her I found to personally unbelievable, because what happened during the Clone Wars, there weren't a lot of Jedi survivors in the first place, and they made sure of that for that reason. And I think her as a character, I saw what they were doing, what they were trying to do, but because it was too late in the show, it didn't hit with me. It didn't sit well with me, and so I think what they were trying to do, they should have established it earlier on, or at least gave it 10 episodes and not 6, because sometimes a lot of the episodes felt like they dragged and they didn't really add anything.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000% there. But overall, again, I feel like the moving gears a little bit, the visuals in the show, I have to say, are fairly strong. I do feel like we talked about the action before. Like, action, generally speaking, was not the greatest, unless you go to that that fight at the end. But I think you and I may have disagreed on that one. But like, I do feel like even though the show overall was like a mixed bag with certain things, at least for me, like the slow buildup was worth the payoff at the end, because I was not expecting to enjoy the payoff at the end nearly as much as I did, and it was more satisfying than expected considering the timeline of the show, right? Like, I feel like there was a lack of stakes, because at the end of the day, like, considering the timeline of as far as when this takes place, we know who dies, how and when, right? So you'd feel like the stakes weren't there, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, those lack of stakes, at least for me, were made up for by the satisfying, like, emotional and character payoffs, particularly when it comes to Obi-Wan and Anakin, because I just felt like it deepened certain things with those two particular characters.
I can understand that, but yeah, for me, wasn't too fond of it. Wasn't a big fan of it. I didn't think it developed as strong as it should have. To me, I could definitely tell this show was definitely meddled with a lot behind the scenes when it came to the script, because I remember even an article saying that Kathleen Kennedy she didn't like what Kenobi was becoming or whatever, and she had kind of helped have a hand into rewriting the show essentially. So it definitely felt rewritten, because it definitely felt like in the beginning they did want to go somewhere, but then they ultimately switched, and to me it was pretty abruptly, and I felt it, and I didn't think the payoff at the end was nearly as satisfying as it should be. As much as the emotion, I liked what they were doing. Again, I think they should have been more. Vader shouldn't have been in the show visually, like the physical presence, as much as he should have, in my opinion. So,
okay, that's fair. Something too that I was thinking about as well, and I was a little surprised to hear this. Apparently, there are rumblings of a second season for this show.
No. I'm sorry. Just please no.
Yeah, and it's just weird too, because like I feel like this show, again, like, you know, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Like I feel like they wrapped him up and connected him to where he should be, like by the time A New Hope comes around. So I just don't feel like the second season would be necessary.
No, I don't think there's any need for a second season. They already said it's a limited series. Please don't backtrack. Just leave it where it is and focus on new Star Wars projects.
Yeah.
Fresh new ones.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. That's that, I guess. So, again, for everybody that's here with us, thoughts on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series? Was it worth the watch? You know, we really want to know your thoughts, so leave them in that comment section. And if you like this review and want more like it, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell to get all notifications for more. Now, before we talk about Marcel the Shell with shoes on, one of the many movies that premiered in theaters this past weekend was the new horror film The Black Phone. In a Denver suburb in 1978, after a boy is kidnapped by a serial abductor and thrown in a soundproof basement, he finds a phone that connects him with the abductor's previous victims. This is based on the short story of the same name by Joe Hill. And I'm going to be totally upfront. I didn't expect to enjoy this movie as much as I did. This movie was very, very scary. It was very intense. And I feel like the thing that stands out to me personally about this movie the most is the fact that it juggles two horror elements at the same time. You have the child abduction horror element that made the movie feel very real. It made me feel like, that element made me feel like, oh shit, like what if this happened to someone I know? Like it made me worry about, like, you know, certain younger siblings walking home from school, like, you know, like, it made me worry about, like, oh shit, like, what if this happens one day when I have my own kids? Like that, like this movie did a great job of planting that fear into myself. And I also loved how you infused that with the whole supernatural element too. You know, I didn't know about that aspect going into this film. Like I thought it was just the kid gets kidnapped and he tries to find a way to get out. And that alone too was very freaky and it was unnerving, and there was just like some pretty startling imagery. And I remember some of that startling imagery making certain people drop their popcorn in the middle of the movie. But yeah, no, there are a lot of things there that caught me off guard, and I feel like both elements come together very well to make a lasting and unique impression from a horror movie point of view.
Yeah, for sure. And I was not the person that dropped the popcorn. All right, just want to make sure everyone knows this. I did not drop my popcorn.
You sure? You sure? Yeah, I don't know if dropped is the right word. More like threw in the air is probably a more accurate way to explain that.
But yeah, for me, this was actually, out of all the movies we saw this past weekend, this was my most anticipated one, because I love horror, I love the supernatural, and for me, I really liked this movie. I liked it because, like you said, supernatural, that's the biggest one for me. Anything supernatural, I somehow watch it at some point. And I like horror, and I like how they implemented, and this is, to me, this was a different type of horror. It wasn't horror in the sense of necessarily they were trying to do jump scares or they were trying to do those things. It was more almost just this psychological thing of what would happen if you were in a secluded area, if you were abducted by some random person, you were in this isolated brick, stone, concrete cubicle for days on end with limited amount of food. How would you have to survive and defend yourself? This, to me, this was like horror in the sense of survival, and they imbued the supernatural with the aspect of trying to get out, uncovering certain clues and etc. within his domain that he's in for the main character Finney to get out. And I really enjoyed the revelations, the how he was trying to get out, what happened, and the setbacks. It was engaging, it was thrilling, it was again, the jump scares are there. I was affected by it. I dropped my popcorn. But overall, I think this movie was honestly really solid. I do feel as if, though, I loved Ethan Hawke as, the villain, the abductor. However, it didn't feel as if the character had a lot of character development necessarily. Or at least, not necessarily development, but I didn't find a motivation. Or I didn't really see a motivation. So that was a bit, I would have to at least seen some of the motivation as to why of he's abducting these kids. But again, other than that, his performance was definitely a standout. He was absolutely amazing. He was definitely terrifying. So it was just like, geez, this man is brutal. And especially when you start uncovering certain things, it's just like, oh man.
Yep. And it's funny, too. Like, I'd never seen him in anything like this before. Maybe he's given similar performances I just don't know about, but I loved seeing him in something like this. He was definitely a very intimidating force, and at least he felt very unpredictable. He was an unpredictable villain. And to kind of build on kind of sound off on the point that you made, too, as far as, like, a lack of motivation, like, that is fair. I agree with you on that. Like, all we know is that, like, oh, he's abducting these kids. And I couldn't help but wonder, like, what is he doing with them? Like, why is he doing it? Why is he doing the things that he's doing with these kids? But overall, again, Ethan Hawke is very much a force to be reckoned with in this film. Props to him. And something else, too, the juvenile performances in this film as well are very, very strong. When I think of certain films, right, that the performances of younger cast members, right, just aren't there, I think of, like, the standard that can be lived up to with juvenile performances like in this film. You have Mason Thames as Finney, the main character, Madeline McGraw as Gwen, his sister, who kind of has, like, a sort of supernatural, I don't know if presence is the right word, but, like, connections herself. And I feel like the two of them give very, very strong performances, so job well done on their part.
Definitely. Like, they were great. Definitely felt the bond the brother and sister had for each other, and even Finney and one of his friends. Like I said, this movie I thought was really good. And again, I like the aspect of just, it wasn't a horror because of jump scare. It was a horror because of just isolation. I think that's the biggest selling point of this movie. It's just isolation to the point of, one, social isolation, because we got a sense of how he was socially. And now, physically isolation. And you have to deal with someone who's more powerful than you physically and taller. So it's like, if you can't handle yourself then, how are you going to handle yourself in this situation? And I love seeing that growth of him getting out of that normal comfort zone, getting out of that, becoming essentially, how I see it, someone who's more ruthless and willing to do what he needs to do to survive and to get out. And I love that aspect of this movie a lot.
Yeah. Overall, like, I feel like the execution from director Scott Derrickson, who also directed the first Doctor Strange film. I thought he did a great job in this film. Like, between, like, the horror, again, he meshes the two horror elements very, very well. There's a sort of grim 1970s aesthetic that, again, adds to that uneasiness that I felt watching the film. So this is a movie that I did not expect to enjoy as much as I did, but once I figured, like, I read certain reviews about it, I'm like, all right, maybe this will be worth checking out. Maybe this won't just be like another generic horror film. So I figured it'd be worth talking about on the show, and I know you mentioned it a couple times too. So here we are.
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought like you were gonna go into the next topic.
Yeah, no.
But yeah,
Good.
thoroughly enjoyed it. If you're a horror fan,
Yeah, no.
recommend it. So
Yeah. So okay, for everybody, what are your thoughts on the Black Phone? Like, we of course we had a lot to say, and we hope you have a lot to say in that comment section wherever it is that you can. And if you enjoyed this review, don't forget that subscribe button to tap and the bell to ring to get all notifications for more chats just like this one. Now, before we end off the show today with our review of the new Elvis movie, Marcel the Shell. If anyone remembers Marcel the Shell from about a decade ago, he just got a feature-length film that premiered in theaters this past weekend. And based on, of course, like I said, on the short film series that blew up the internet about a decade ago, Marcel, a tiny juvenile shell, goes on a journey to find his long-lost family. And I remember watching, like, the first couple of Marcel the Shell films, short films, before watching this movie. And, they were cute, they were enjoyable, they're funny. And I feel like this film, in a lot of ways, bears the same spirit that I saw in those short films. So I feel like if you're a Marcel the Shell fan, you're going to enjoy this film very much.
yeah, I don't recall watching the short films personally, so this was all new to me. But just from what I got from this movie as a first-time viewer and experiencing, I guess, the world of Marcel and this character, this has easily become one of my favorite movies of this year. Easily. I absolutely adore this movie. It is so heartfelt and human in nature. It is just colorful in a lot of the personalities that come across. And again, for me, I honestly forgot he was a shell at times, because it's just like, this felt like they crafted human beings. And that's how you know when a character, in my opinion, is written especially really well, is when they actually feel human. Despite what they look, they feel human. And you got a sense of who Marcel was, his quick-witty nature, his comedy chops, and even sometimes the sadness he goes through, the insecurities he has. Like, it felt like a near fully fleshed out human being, and I was just like, wow, this is a shell. I have to keep reminding myself during the movie, this is an inanimate object. It's a shell that just has so much personality, so much, a great character arc, just absolutely phenomenal across all of the boards. The emotion was there. I cried about like 3, 4, 5 times in this movie alone.
And it's only an hour and a half long, too.
It is only an hour and a half long, and I cried that many times.
Yeah, and again, like, building on your point, too, as far as, like, the characters themselves, right? Like, and it's just so crazy, like, how much humanity was brought and inserted and shown in anthropomorphic shells. Again, like, the characters, I think, is one of the strongest things that this movie has going for it. Like you said, you have Marcel, he's adorable, he's innocent. Again, he's very childlike. He's both fearless and fearful, like a precocious child. He has no filter, but he's also, like, afraid of change after, his family being taken away from him and his grandmother. And I loved seeing and hearing his point of view. Again, his point of view is very endearing. It's hilarious, but it's also, like, acerbic in the most innocent way possible. And he reminds me of, like, certain younger cousins of mine. So, again, like, I think that kind of builds on like, the whole humanity point there. Nana Connie, his grandmother that he lives with, she kind of reminded me of my Nana, my great-grandmother, too. Rest in peace, Nana. And, she's, like, this very loving but also, like, tough and stubborn and reserved character, too. Like, I loved her.
Yeah, I loved her, too. She reminded me of my grandmother, too. But, like I said, this is one of the most human movies, I think, this year so far as what I've seen so far.
Yeah.
And I think it just goes to show for how short this movie is. It's relatively a short movie. It hit a lot of the emotional beats that I was not expecting.
Same.
That tossed me a curveball specifically. And it was the most heartfelt thing I've seen, and the most hopeful and uplifting thing. And I think this is a good movie to see, especially, during some of these times like this, when it came to COVID and everything. And it's just like, this movie really, it hit in a lot of ways, and I can easily see this. I hope it gets nominated for an Oscar at the very least.
I feel like it has a very strong chance of doing so, particularly in the writing section too. One of the things that I feel like this movie has going for it is, again, like the execution, right? It's stellar, but it's also unique. You know, I loved how there's like the mix of stop motion and live action, and it's seamless. Felt really seamless, and I forgot that it was animation. I loved the mockumentary style that made it feel that much more authentic. And I loved the real world applications and relations too. You know, like certain news characters like being incorporated, like, you know, you have everything going on with the internet and the incorporation of the character Dean, right, who's like also, you know, this film like has a sort of meta element in it because of him, right? And I love that meta element with him like as a filmmaker in the film, but also in real life. So he kind of like inserted himself into the film too. But like one of the things that like really builds on the whole meta element too is how, like, you know, in the film, like they mentioned like how he kind of he's like going through a divorce, right? Or like he's going through a breakup. If you know like the background of Marcel the show, right? He co-wrote the original films with his either girlfriend, I don't know if they were married at this point, Jenny Slate, right? Who also co-wrote the script for this film and voiced Marcel in both the short films and the feature film. And I think the even more interesting element too is that they're divorced, and they're divorced when they worked on this film, if I'm not mistaken. So it just made it feel that much more, I don't know, intriguing. And I just think it's interesting like how they were able to come together to work on this film.
Yeah, like, man, this movie was just so good. Like, if you can, like, go see this. This was well worth it. I'm happy I saw this.
It was worth the trip in the city for me.
Yeah, this was worth seeing in theaters, and I thought this was just executed so well. And again, one of the biggest, strongest aspects of this movie are the characters.
Yep.
And just how human and heartfelt the story was, and how human these characters felt. And I think that's the easily the biggest selling point of this movie. And again, I highly recommend a lot of people to go see this. This movie was exceptional. It was great.
it had the right balance of heart and humor. And again, I feel like a lot of movies do that, but again, this movie found a way to do that in its own unique style, again, because of like all the other applications and executions that went on for this film. And again, like even then, like knowing the backstory of Marcel the Shell and the people involved, like made me appreciate the film that much more. I loved the whole meta element, and I loved how this movie, even though A24 only distributed this film, like they didn't like actually produce the film, like they only distributed it, but it still felt like an A24 film while being its own thing at the same time.
Yep, absolutely. So, you know, very pleased with it. Very happy. Happy I saw it. Easily became one of my favorite movies of this year.
Yeah, same here. And we're only at the end of June. Now, again, for everybody, did you get a chance to actually watch Marcel the Shell with Shoes On? Have you ever seen any of the original short films from about a decade or so ago? You know, what'd you think? You know, leave your thoughts wherever it is that you can. Please, we really want to know exactly what it is, what you're thinking of everything that we talk about on this show. And again, if you like this review and want more like it, you know what to do. Smack that subscribe button, ring the bell to get all notifications, whether you're on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And now to end off the show, the long-awaited Elvis movie premiered in theaters. Darius and I just saw it last night as of us recording this podcast. And the film Elvis follows the life and times of the king of rock and roll, both through his point of view and that of his conniving manager, Colonel Tom Parker. Now, the thing that anchors this movie the most are the performances. The performances are, in my opinion, terrific, and I feel like Austin Butler was absolutely incredible as Elvis Presley. I feel like he captured his swagger, his range of emotions. He just had an incredible performance, charisma, and I just feel like he really disappeared into the role. He really did.
Yeah, going into Elvis, I was somewhat excited. At the same time, I kind of wasn't, mainly because I saw the runtime, and I was just like, do I really want to see this movie for 2 hours and 40 minutes? But I was like, you know what? I've done worse. So, but yeah, for me, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Absolutely enjoyed it a lot. Loved it. I think, like you said, Austin Butler as Elvis was just fantastic. He definitely became Elvis, I think, at certain points, and I kind of forgot it was an actor at sometimes. You know, and Tom Hanks also great job. You know, like you said, these performances overall in this movie are really freaking good, really solid.
And you don't expect Tom Hanks to do a villainous role usually, right? And I feel like he was unexpectedly strong in doing something like this smarmy character, you know. And it's weird, like I wasn't always sure. He kind of had like this role of like an unreliable narrator, right? And I feel like I wasn't always sure like where his like real interests were, like what his real intentions were. Like he kind of gives you a preview of that at the beginning, but like you kind of see like certain hints of like, you know, certain like I said, just like certain interests that he really has. Like it kind of toyed with me a little bit too, to like not always know exactly what his motivations really were. And I feel like him and Austin Butler, like they do play really well off of each other.
Yeah, they really do, and I really liked seeing, you know, how they were telling Elvis's life. And I gotta say, I think another very strong aspect of this movie is really the editing.
Yes.
They have been
God.
going from scene to scene and unique and colorful and very, you know, exciting ways. I were like, yeah, this is definitely an Elvis movie at some points. You know, like it is the editing of the scenes in itself felt like a performance, and I really liked that. But another thing, and this was something I was worried about, and I mentioned it to you in the car when we were heading back, was I was kind of concerned, but I'm happy that they actually dived a bit deep into his inspirations of music and rock and roll, and how that was coming from the African American community, you know, back then. And you actually were in that moment with him, which I really liked. I didn't expect him to go that much into it, but I really liked that they actually delved into that, and you kind of got to see where his mentality was at a bit when in regards to music, in regards to, you know, who he was and how, I guess, the media and even society back then kind of perceived music from, unfortunately, Caucasian people and African Americans back then. And you can just see the differentiation between that, and how obviously unfortunately if a white guy did it, they would be more successful than a black guy back then.
Yeah,
specifically, you know, would not be successful, and if anything, probably, you know, much worse things would have happened to them, probably, most likely. So I really liked seeing that they were definitely imbuing that into the story, because I wasn't sure if they were going to gloss over that or anything like that, like some other films I've noticed, but they went into it, and I really like that.
And it is so important that they did, because when you're telling the story of, like, you know, an artist of any kind, right, like it's important to see like where they get their inspirations from and really dive into it, so you can get a better understanding of why they make the things that they make. And one thing I will say about this movie, in terms of its length, it did feel a bit too long. Like, it definitely dragged at times. Like, I'm not looking back, I'm not sure if every scene was essential, and it did feel a bit unfocused at certain points. But again, maybe that's just, like, you know, the nature of a sprawling biopic like this one, like when you're just telling someone's life story. But again, this movie made up for its length with its energy. And again, like you said before, that came in large part because of the editing. Like, the editing from scene to scene cut to cut was spectacular. Oh my God. Like, that, like, by and large, like, I will say this movie was a masterclass in editing. There were certain sound syncing issues that I saw that, like, I heard a line of dialogue, and I'm not sure, like, if, like, it actually, like, matched up with, like, the lips moving. And again, I saw that more with Colonel Tom Parker more than anything. Like, I don't know if it was just that, or if just because, like, how his mouth, like, maybe didn't move as wide open, and it just was hard for me to see, like, the connection between, like, his lips moving and the words being said. But all in all, like, again, just like, especially from, like, a picture editing point of view, from a pacing point of view, this movie by and large does, like, a great job. this movie was directed by Baz Luhrmann, who did The Great Gatsby. He did the Romeo and Juliet from the 90s, and he did Moulin Rouge. And I've only seen Moulin Rouge, but like the camera movements and like zany nature of this film kind of reminded me of Moulin Rouge.
Okay. Yeah, and I wanted to build on the aspect of where you said that it was definitely lengthy. I know for me, I definitely felt the length. It felt longer than I think it should have. I think there are certain scenes that could have been shortened. At least shortened, maybe not cut out, but just shortened a bit more, made it a bit tighter. It did feel a bit unfocused at times. But I think, like I said, I think the editing alone of it, that energy, that fast-pacedness from certain scenes made up for that. Yep. Not entirely, but it definitely made up for that. And I really liked, and I gotta give it to Tom Hanks, I really liked what they did with Tom Hanks and the Colonel, and seeing how much just, oh man, it's that thing where you just, if you're in this type of industry, be on the lookout, you know, like really find the right person. Don't jump on the first opportunity you see because you want to get ahead. Focus on the right person. Get to know them first before you even sign those dotted lines, and understand that document you are signing, because it can screw you over in the end. And you definitely got a sense of that in this movie, and
with someone as big and powerful as Elvis too, right? Like that's the thing that really makes you think too, right? Like someone like him, someone as influential as him, still got screwed. Like that's crazy when you really think about it.
Yeah, it really is, and it gives you a certain perspective where, when you're, again, anyone who's up and coming, you just got to be a bit cautious about who you unfortunately associate yourself with.
Yep.
Because of the people, unfortunately, like Colonel, are out there, and they're not going to put your best forward. And even one thing throughout the movie that they were acknowledging, even I was questioning, like, yeah, that's a... How do you miss that opportunity? Like, something's not right. Even I was like, something's not right. And I couldn't really put it together yet until certain other scenes. I'm like, oh man. And I felt bad for Elvis. I felt so bad for that man towards the end. Because to me, the ending, or towards that third act, it felt like everything was going off on all cylinders.
Yep.
And I really liked it. And I was like, this was intense. This was gripping. And Austin Butler, my God, Jesus.
Yep.
He definitely gave a performance of his life.
Yeah. And again, like I feel like people are calling this like a star-making performance. I definitely agree with that sentiment. And again, what better way to give yourself a star-making performance than to do it as the king of rock and roll, right? You know, this movie like definitely has a lot going for it. I love the use of the soundtrack, like, you know, Elvis's music. I love the incorporation of American history into this film, like how like it kind of impacts him, just like impacts everything around him. I feel like this movie found a lot of ways to distinguish itself from musical biopics. Like I look at this in comparison to a film like, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody. I feel like Bohemian Rhapsody was one of the most overrated films that I've seen in a long time, other than like, you know, the whole Live Aid sequence at the end. But that's a discussion for another day. But I do feel like, again, this movie found a way to be very much its own thing.
Yep, absolutely. So I definitely recommend this movie to a lot of people to go see it. I'm not sure if I recommend them to sit in a theater for 2 hours and 49 minutes, but 2 hours and 40 minutes, but you know what? It was still a really good movie.
Yeah.
to say the least.
It was still a great time. It was very, very energetic and very, very entertaining. If it wasn't for those two factors alone, this movie wouldn't sell nearly as well as it does.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely recommend people to see this movie at some point. You know, I'm just saying, you know, like that runtime, you'll feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, I definitely recommend it. Had a good time, lots of energy. It felt like the concert. I was in a concert too, and again, that's what you should want to edit out an Elvis movie like that, and I love that. Yeah. So, you know, like I said, definitely recommend it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Really good, solid performances, great music, great soundtrack. Just chef's kiss. Mwah.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So for all of you, what are your thoughts on the Elvis film? Is it good enough for the King of Rock and Roll, or is it just another generic biopic film? Leave your thoughts wherever it is that you can. And that's all we have for today's episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to slam that subscribe button and ring the bell to get all notifications for future shows and clips, whether you're on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next week.